Hello everyone, I am recording this for Instagram and a YouTube video. I'm going to be sharing my perspective, my take on the whole Candice Reed situation. There's a couple of things I wanted to share. You know, I have worked for the public sector for many years. I have worked for K through 12 and community college. So I have been receiving a lot of comments saying that there's no way that she can be fired because of teachers' unions, because it's really hard to fire a teacher. And I'm here to tell folks that that is a lie, that teachers can be dismissed, can be fired, can be removed from their teaching positions. Now, I will say that I have seen how problematic teachers have not only, you know, it is a little tricky because I have seen districts not fire them directly, but next thing you know, they work at the district. Next thing you know, they are in charge of RSP program at the district level. So there's ways that the district tries to keep them employed, but not work directly with students, right? So it's shady, it is unprofessional, it is immoral, unethical, but that's what a lot of districts do. Now, I am completely in agreement when people say, you know, the whole entire system must be changed, you know, Indigenous people's history must be on the forefront. I agree 100% with that. Education as a system of Eurocentric knowledge and colonial thinking and assimilation, it is education. That's what public education is. The narrative, the cultural, you know, understanding of it, the way they educate our kids definitely is pro-colonial, pro-white supremacy, pro-Eurocentricity. You're supposed to reinforce Eurocentric models, Eurocentricity, white supremacy. That is the given. However, I still am a strong, firm believer that Candice Reed must be removed, must be fired for her actions. Not only was this demonstrated on October 19, but the fact that she's been doing this for almost 10 years documented. We don't know, maybe she's been doing this since she became a teacher. But so definitely I would say for her to be fired. And how can she be fired? Let me read you article. This is Education Code EDC Title 2. It's she is in violation of Educational California Code 44932, which states a permanent employee shall not be dismissed except for one or more of the following causes. 1. Immoral conduct, including but not limited to egregious misconduct. Number 2, unprofessional conduct. Number 3, commission aiding advocating commission acts. Number 4, dishonesty. Number 5, unsatisfactory performance. Number 6, evident unfitness for service. Number 7, physical or mental condition unfitting him or her to instruct or associate with children. Number 8, persistent violation or refusal to obey the school laws of the state or reasonable regulations prescribed for the government for the public schools by the state board or by the governing board. Number 9, conviction of a felony or any crime involving moral turpitude. Number 10, violation of section 51530, conduct specified in 1028. So she is in clear violation of California Ed Code 44932, right? So what happens, to my knowledge, obviously the teachers union is going to come in, they're going to try to save her, they're going to try to justify her actions, saying that it was innocence, that she hasn't been taught this, that she's going to learn, that she's going to go through trainings, that they're going to do this. It's ridiculous, right? Because why? Because this is an attack on the entire system of education. The fact that she was on a yearbook wearing the so-called headdress, right, celebrated for her memorable service to children, the way that she presents mathematics, right? This is documented in the actual yearbook. So imagine if they put all the yearbooks together. How long has she been doing this? Where did she get this idea that she can do this? What does the credential program look like for public education, for K through 12? right? What does the district say, claiming that they're for equity and respect and diversity, where we know that's bullshit because she's been doing this for 10 years. Now, another thing that this demonstrates is, the first thing I thought about was, wow, what a brave Native student for filming this, right? What a brave soul of that person filming this. Imagine how many cases do not get filmed, do not get documented, do not get exposed. So this tells you this is a window into that world and that experience of Native children. Think of your experiences. Think of, my experience growing up. I grew up in Cudahy, California, Huntington Park, and I'll tell you that the majority of the students, the teachers I had were white. Yes, I did have those rare, good white teachers, right, that were respectful, trying to be culturally sensitive. But I did have the majority of this white savior mentality teachers, right, who see brown students as, oh, pobrecitos, let me come save them, let me work in the hood, right? And not only that, but that mentality is also looked into the entertainment industry. Look at all these films about white saviors, about white educators teaching kids in the hood and making an impact. Now, has that happened? Yes, it has. There's been cases of that. But the fact that those stories get maximized, like maximum exposure, and they make movies about white people saving brown and black kids, what narrative are they feeding? What narrative are they trying to get through our kids, right? I remember in high school, I had a white teacher who would scream at us if we did anything wrong, if we answered incorrectly in her class. And I remember I was one of the better students, and one day she pulled me aside and she said, oh, I don't scream at you that way because you're different, but they need to learn, so that's why I talk to them that way. But it's just for their good, right? Because that's the way they're gonna learn. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, this is like a super white teacher, super like Republican, and I'm like, what the fuck? Right? And then there's so much of this culture of white teachers feeling entitled, feeling that they're doing us a favor by teaching us, right? Talk about equity in public schools. Now, I want to talk about this Candice Reed thing because, again, I agree that the entire education system is pro-colonial, pro-assimilationist, but we cannot let this pass, right? I hope that the community continues to put pressure on Riverside Unified School District. The family of the Native student has already called for the community not to protest at her Candice Reed's home, and the community is respecting that. So the protests are going to continue at the actual high school and maybe at the district office, but it's really important that the pressure continue. And the fact that the district is not being quick to denounce this, is not being quick because they're trying to buy time, because I am telling you, more things are going to come out, worse things are going to come out, right? And so I'm hoping that this also empowers youth to not feel intimidated by their teachers, right? What she was doing, she's in violation of so many things, right? But that whole dynamic of she's the teacher, she has the power, she has the control of the class, and we have to just be quiet and take this abuse. Like, that's something that she uses in that classroom. We can definitely see that, right? And so I'm hoping that youth all over are telling themselves, you know what, my voice matters. If you feel, youth that are watching this, if you feel that you're a victim of racism, if your teacher is doing some racist shit in the classroom, document it, start a petition, document everything. If you can record them, if you can cite them, everything, right? You have a lot of power. And that's the thing that we have been taught not to, right? We've been taught the education model is basically stay quiet, listen, repeat, be obedient, be submissive, do the Pledge of Allegiance if that's done, and that's it, right? So we're not engaged as critical thinkers, right? And so that's one of the things that this case, this whole Candice Reed thing is exposing. What we know, a lot of us know this, a lot of us have gone through many racist aggressions in the classrooms, right? Not to this extent, I don't think I have, but a lot of other people have, right? And again, she's been doing this at least for 10 years. Maybe it has been more. We do not know. But the fact that this is an actual lesson plan, that this is actually accepted by the district, it tells you a lot about that culture of education. What are these teachers being taught in the credential programs? How are they able to make a mockery out of an entire race of people, laughing and joking, right? How are they able to do this, right? Because the education system teaches us that it's okay, right? Because she's white, and it's okay to have light humor and be racist. It's in part of the whole systematic way that we as Native people are viewed by education. And let me not even get started on maternal colonization, right? She is a white educator in a classroom that you saw very diverse of students, but historically, white women have been at the forefront of being the maternal colonization, the maternal colonizers, where they're seen as the mothers of civilization, right? And if you look at that history, you look at how massive displacement was done of indigenous community, who was there to reprimand Native mothers, who was there to say that we were being unfit to have our children? It's white women. Right? And this whole idea that white women know better, that they are the model, right, of womanhood, of educators, it's all reinforced in these systems of education. It's all being reinforced, and it's there. Look at what we're looking at here, right? Candice Reed is an example of maternal colonialism, of that whole thing about white saviorism in education, in public education. And talk about equity. How is Riverside Unified School District talking about being equitable and diversity and inclusion, where if you understand equity, diversity, inclusion, you do not mock students, you do not mock Native culture, you do not mock Native spirituality, right? Everything that is on here is there. Yes, absolutely. The foster care system, the adoption system, absolutely, right? It's rooted with a lot of white women in the forefront. We're critiquing our family values, critiquing our parenting, right? So this is major. Of course, this is bigger than Candice Reed. I think everyone is in agreement with that. I think that's what we all have a consensus on. But I think we have to continue pushing back. We have to get her out of teaching and endangering and attacking and abusing more children. Bonita Tabatia says, yes, I wish I would have known all this when I was younger. I had a teacher tell me once, you're going to fail my class. I already know your type. What the fuck? I was a transfer student, ended up with a name. Yep, absolutely. So again, me too. When I saw this, I was like, it just reminded me of all those aggressions. They call them microaggressions, right? Of white educators teaching the poor brown kids. And it happens a lot, and you see this again in these films that it gets glamorized, right? There was a film that came out in the 90s with Hilary Swank, I think, that she's like comes into the hood, and she makes the kids write poetry, and and then there's another one with this other white actress, the same idea, right? She's coming to the hood, she's coming to teach these poor brown and black kids. And it's an idea that really is used, right? And I have worked in public schools and elementary schools in both places, in predominantly white schools and in predominantly brown schools. And I see that behavior, right? I see that white saviorism, like, oh, these kids, oh my God, these poor kids. And it's like, what are you doing to offer them solutions besides this pittiness, besides being the white savior? It's a really fucked up psychological culture that's going on, and it's crazy. It's crazy. It's still on Netflix. Thank you, Tonio. There's two films that I remember that I can honestly say there's two films that center white teachers saving these black and brown students, right? And not that doesn't happen. I'm not going to say that doesn't happen. But the fact that they only focus on those stories, how many of our own people are in the hood, right? that are doing magnificent impact on the youth, right? How many of us work within our own communities to do this, right? How many of us work tirelessly to do these impacts, to make sure that we help the next generation, because we know what it's like to go through those schools, because we know what it's like to, to be there, right? Gangster Paradise was the song. Michelle Pfeiffer, yes, that one. Exactly. So they're pimping our culture, they're pimping the narrative, right? Of, oh, these youth, these at-risk youth, and I've seen it. I've seen it so much. And talk about equity, right? This entire conversation about equity. How many schools do you know of? I know plenty in Orange County. I know many in LAUSD, but predominantly in Orange County, the student body is brown. And who's the principal? White. A white principal. A white woman. It happens so much. So this should really expose a systemic problem that is fucking up the entire education system for our kids. That's what this is exposing. How many white principals are in charge of predominantly brown schools? I have seen it. I have lived it. I have been in that situation, right? So what this is happening is exposing that there is no equity, that the staff, the faculty do not represent the students, right? They do not reflect the community. And look at what's happening. A mockery out of Native culture, a mockery. Again, this reflects on the teaching credentials. What are they being taught, right? What values are they holding? How are they being reprimanded? Is there any type of accountability? So one thing I wanted to recommend for those educators that are watching this, for anyone that's in there, we know that not all educators are bad. We know that there's a lot of educators who are doing their best, who are struggling. I have met those teachers as well, right? Who really care for the students, who really want to make sure that they impact the students. But it's really, really important. It's really, really important to look at this, because one of the things I wanted to recommend, there was a school that I worked at where there was an anonymous app where students could report like bullying, right? If they're being bullied, they would submit. Thank you, Chente. Chente says, great topic on education. Thank you. There was this elementary school I worked at, and the principal had this app where if the students are being bullied, they would report, right, to this app, and the principal would get notice of the complaint right away, right? So that was an interesting take on it, because I was like, wait a second, not only is there bullying that happens laterally among students, among their peers, but why not have an app for students who can report, top down, right? Vertical oppression, right? Reporting racism, reporting acts of racism by their teachers, right? Because it's not just peers. It makes it seem like it's the students, but sometimes it's the teachers, as we're seeing here, right? Firing one teacher won't do much on this problem. It could set some sort of precedent, but that's it. We must attack the core white system, taking positions where decisions are made. That's exactly what this live is about. Right? I'm talking about that it's a systemic problem, and that Candice Reed is a window into that reality. However, I still think she should be removed. Yes, that's not the entire priority. It's going to fix anything, but it's going to send a message, and it's going to give us some type of result and say, look, this is what happened to Candice Reed. What else can we do systematically? And that's what's happening. It's the dumbing down on our people through public education. Yes, absolutely. And so, yeah, I grew up in these schools, right? I grew up in these schools where it was, we were taught how to think, when to think, how to be, crafts people, right? In schools, there's a disconnect with the community. There's a disconnect with the parents, right? And I've seen this. Like I've said, I have worked in all areas of education. I worked in predominantly white schools. I worked in predominantly brown schools, right? And I see it. I see that within the same district, I see how they're being treated. I see what happens, right, politically within these campuses. And so what I was talking about that app is that there is an app that one of the principals I was working with, that she created an app where students could report bullying, right? So I'm thinking, you know what? I think students should be empowered to speak out against racism, against all of these systems of oppression that they are also facing, right? And this whole intimidation of the teacher has the power, the student is just passive and should just listen to everything and take it because they don't have power. That's bullshit, right? That's bullshit. That's not a humane education. That's not critical education. That's not teaching our kids to be critical thinkers. It's teaching them to be passive learners, right? And so anyway, so yes, the whole entire thing about Candice Reed, it's a window into a systemic problem within education. And this does not end in public schools K through 12. This does not end. This is also a problem at community colleges. It's a problem of equity in community colleges, right? And there's so much to be done. Why is it that we're in 2021 and the leadership, the actual administration, is still predominantly white? It's still predominantly white. You're looking at Los Angeles, right? Los Angeles Community College District. They did a study, right? An equity research, disaggregated data research, and they found that out, right? That the student population does not match the faculty, does not match the leadership, does not match the administration. And that is a problem. That is a problem, not just in K through 12. It is a problem in colleges. It is a problem in the entire education system in this colony, right? So that's how it is, right? That's what's happening here. So that's really, really important. And that's one of the things I wanted to talk about, because I've made different posts about this, and so many people were saying that she could not get fired, she could not do this. And I was like, wait a second, I know there's something to it. So again, she is in clear violation of California Education Code 44932, which says a permanent employee should not be dismissed except for the following: immoral conduct, including but not limited to egregious misconduct, unprofessional conduct, dishonesty, unsatisfactory performance, evidence of fitness to service. There's so many violations of that, right? She violated all of that. She has violated all of that, right? All of that. And so we will see what happens, right? But this is a moment of reflection, especially educators. You know, educators, I know a lot of us as educators are really trying to change this shit, because it's so systemic, it's so embedded into education that it's really, really hard, right? And it's going to make it more hard for students who, you know, just think about this. If nothing happens to Candice Reed, right? If nothing is going to happen to her, what does that say about Native children? Look at what's happening. Look at the residential schools. They're continuing to find bodies of Native children in boarding schools, residential schools. That's happening historically in the background. This is the backdrop of what's happening with Candice Reed, right? The historical background is that kids are still being found in these residential schools and these boarding schools. And then we have an example of the continuing dehumanization of Native students through the portrayal and actions of this theater of racism by Candice Reed. So again, what's happening in boarding schools or residential schools, how different is that with what's happening with public education? And how does that racialized thinking, you know, how has it changed, and how has it remained the same, right? That is super important, because they're all connected. What do we have? We have bodies of indigenous children, and we have, you know, white women, predominantly white women as educators. That dynamic, that racial dynamic that continues to happen in education, it continues. It continues, not just in K through 12, but it continues at the college level as well. It's super important that we continue to put pressure. Again, the Native student has already asked, the family of that Native student have already asked the community not to protest Candice Reed at her house, which is being respected, but to instead focus the energy and the protest against the school district and the school. So this is continuing. This is an example of maternal colonialism. This is an example of how Native students are dehumanized by education systems that do not continue. They're not respected. They're not included in the narrative. They're not seen as worthy. And think about it. If she wanted to bring in an indigenous perspective, how many indigenous scholars are out there? She could have consulted indigenous lesson plans. She could have consulted an indigenous educator. She could have consulted all of these, that are really, progressive lesson plans, right? That do not attack students, right? How lazy is that? How lazy is that? Instead of you as a white educator doing research and finding out resources that you can use if you really want to talk about indigenous communities, why not rely on resources that are made available by indigenous scholars, by indigenous teachers, educators? Chente says, when the law does not remove her, she is being protected and we must expose her protectors. The issue will go to a commission and we need to find the connections to the commissioners. Absolutely. Absolutely, Chente. Yes, I totally agree. Yes, because they're not gonna penalize her, right? Look at the statements of Riverside Unified School District. They're obviously not going to take action against her, right? And I want to see their last statement that they wrote, right? Riverside Unified School District. They're not backing down, and they're throwing the word California Code, California Education Code. It's ridiculous, right? They're trying to hide behind this, this whole using California Education Code. Well, California Education Code can be used to fire her, right? She teaches in Riverside. Let me look here. Look at their statement, okay? This is their statement. Okay. I'm trying to make this bigger. So their declaration said, it says, a recording of one of our teachers has been widely circulated on social media. These behaviors are completely unacceptable and an offensive depiction of the vast and expansive Native American cultures and practices. Her actions do not represent the values of our district. The teacher has been placed on leave while the district conducts an investigation. The Riverside Unified School District values diversity, equity, and inclusion and does not condone behavior against these values. We are deeply committed to implementing inclusive practices and policies that honor the rich diversity of our district and the greater region. We will be working with our students, families, and staff and community to regain your trust. So you value diversity, equity, and inclusion, but she's been doing this for almost 10 years. That's bullshit, right? You got caught. She was exposed. She's been doing this. It's been documented. So if they really think that she's going against, it says here, right? It says these behaviors are completely unacceptable and an offensive depiction of the vast and expansive Native American cultures. If this is really completely unacceptable, then you should completely dismiss her. You should completely fire her. You should completely remove her from causing more pain and trauma to students. The distress of having a teacher be openly racist and mocking your culture. Imagine how, damaging that's going to be for not just that Native student, but all the students who are exposed to that. What is that teaching them? That it's okay? It's okay to be racist. It's okay to mock people, that their culture doesn't matter, right? So this whole statement that they're giving us is a bunch of bullshit, right? And they're trying to make it seem that they're going to do an investigation. So why are they're investigating themselves? I think the Department of Education should get involved. I think there should be a third party not associated with the district that is investigating these actions. I think students should be interviewed. I think parents should be involved in this. I think this is bigger than just, we're going to self-investigate, right? They should bring in the Department of Education. For those of you who don't know, when schools, when colleges, when they have issues, right, the Department of Education can come in and really, investigate. Right? Are they violations of human rights violations? Are they civil liberty violations on here? right? There's so much that can be done with this, right? We don't need them to investigate themselves. We need a third party outside, not associated with the district, to investigate this. And they're going to find, it is my feeling, because of what I've been reading, that it's going to get worse. We're going to find worse things coming this way. So on their board meeting, it says that they publicly, had to do with this. And it says, I'm trying to read the statement, but they're not saying they're going to fire her. That's not even on the menu. And yes, exactly. Time to get California Public Records Act ready and see what's being discussed. Exactly. We need transparency, right? If they're not going to bring a third party to investigate this, we need transparency. We need access to what is being done. There should be a committee, not associated with their district, that takes this on, right? Because this, if it doesn't go on, we have to remember how education in the law has worked with segregation, with Mendes versus Westminster, right? We're looking at all these cases where they were taken to the legal courts, right? There was lawsuits about this. So how different is this and all this, right? It's really, really important. So again, this is a systemic reflection into the damage that our students go through. And again, think of all those students. Think of all those students who have been exposed to this type of abuse. It's child abuse, right? This is complete child abuse. And they have another statement. It says statement number 2 on October 22nd. It says, please be assured that this has our full attention and it will be addressed expeditiously. After learning of the situation, district administration promptly put the employee on administrative leave, initiated an investigation. The investigation will be managed by the personnel department. The personnel department of Riverside Unified School District is not going to go against the teacher, right? They all work in unison. If you have worked at a school district, you know that they all protect each other. It says, we understand public interest and desire. This is the important part. We understand public interest and a desire for immediate action, but we must act within the processes set in law, including the California Education Code. Tell us which code. Tell us which section of the code are you talking about. You're only being very vague and ambiguous when you mention California Education Code, right? They say, so that our ultimate action is on solid ground and will not further complicate an already fortunate situation. What will further complicate this situation is not firing her. What will further and complicate the situation is if you keep prolonging what the community needs, right? There's emotional distress, unnecessary emotional distress that students were exposed to. And they say the investigation will address who knew what and when, and whether this was an isolated incident or happened in prior years also. Obviously, they know that the community has found out that this has been in practice for years. So that's obviously already answered. I do not want this incident to diminish the work that everyone connected with North High has done over the long period of time to welcome all who enter their school community. So we will see. We will see what happens here. But again, this is systemic. This is institutional. What she's doing represents the culture of education against Native students. If they do not do anything and just give us word service and lip service, notice how they mention California Ed Code, but they do not give us an actual specifics. Be specific, right? This is a liability issue, right? Districts don't like liabilities because liabilities mean money, loss of ATA, right? So this is so super important. Understand that this is a liability. Teachers like this are a liability to your entire school district. And the way school districts run, right, based on money and budgets from the government, it's how are we using this money, right? We're paying for our own racist teachers, right? You're using our tax-paying money, public education money, to be attacked and racist against our Native youth. It's bullshit. So Riverside Unified School District, you need to do better, right? You need to do the right thing and not just investigate, but you need to bring in a third party person committee that is not associated with your school district, because we know that this is going to be worse. There's worse things that are going to come out. So yep, it says, Chenda says, find the Riverside City and Education Charter. The process will be laid out. They tend to hide and process. Yep, in communities. Absolutely. Absolutely. So they're supposed to share their minutes. They're supposed to share, supposed to be transparent. So let's see. If they're going to be investigating, be transparent with the community, because still, again, this has to move, and Candice Reed must be removed from the classroom. She is a danger to our youth. She is a danger to students. She's a danger to the mental health of students. This is an assault. This is an attack. This is violent behavior against students. Thank you very much for watching this live. This has been my commentary on the Candice Reed situation, the racist math teacher who walked around, completely danced around, and made a fun and mockery of Native culture. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned. I'm going to be seeing what else I can investigate on this and see what legal actions the community has as far as what is this doing to the community and a liability. Teachers like her are a huge liability and they should be fired. They're liable. It is a liability to the district. Aren't you concerned about that? Districts don't like liabilities because that means loss of funding. That means loss of budgets. That means loss of potential budgets for their programs, right? So let's see what happens next. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, Chente, for your input. Thank you, everyone. This is a super late live, but this video is going to go up on YouTube because I wanted to document what they're saying. I wanted to share the violations that she is on, right? And also hopefully share people's perspectives and my own perspective as a student who went to public schools, right? With predominantly white educators, and what that has to do with the mental health of students and how that impacts our communities. Thank you so much and have a good night.